The classroom is supposed to be a safe place, a space where laughter echoes between whiteboards and hallways filled with the sound of sneakers on linoleum. But sometimes, behind the notebooks and the teenage chatter, something else grows, quiet, unseen, and unspeakably dark. This is not about monsters born in the shadows. It's about children who sat in the same desks as everyone else, who once smiled for school photos, held pencils, and dreamed of ordinary lives, until something inside them fractured. And when that fracture widened, the world watched in horror. Tonight, we step into the stories of 11 students who turned classrooms into crime scenes. Each name a reminder that evil can hide in plain sight, wearing a backpack, walking the same corridors, breathing the same air. This is The Most Evil School Killers in History. And these are the moments when classmates became victims. Marjorie Stoneman, Douglas High School, Parkland, Florida. It was February 14th, 2018, Valentine's Day. Students at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School were laughing in the hallways, holding balloons and flowers, thinking about love, not survival. The Florida sun was bright, the air light. Then, at 2:19 p.m., 19-year-old Nikolaz Cruz stepped out of an Uber and walked toward the school with a rifle in his hands. He wore a maroon shirt, the same color as the school uniform, and carried a black bag filled with ammunition. He moved with purpose, silent, unnoticed. He had once walked those same halls as a student. Now, he returned as something else. Cruz pulled the fire alarm. Students began filing out, confused but calm. Then came the gunfire, sharp, relentless, echoing off the walls. Teachers screamed for their classes to hide. Some managed to lock their doors. Others didn't have time. He moved from floor to floor, firing through glass, into classrooms, down the halls. Students texted their parents, "There's a shooter. Please call 911. I love you." 6 minutes later, 17 people were dead. 17 more were wounded. When he was done, Cruz dropped his rifle, slipped into the crowd of evacuating students, and walked calmly to a nearby fast food restaurant. He bought a drink. He sat down. He waited. At 3:41, police arrested him without resistance. The world stopped. Televisions filled with breaking news banners, another school, another list of names. This time, children who had just said, "I love you" to their parents that morning. Nikolaz Cruz was not an unknown threat. He was the warning no one wanted to believe. He had been expelled for violent outbursts, cruelty to animals, and disturbing drawings. Teachers reported him. Students whispered his name as a joke. If anyone ever shoots this place up, it'll be him. It was a joke no one laughs at anymore. Online, Cruz posted photos of guns, dead animals, and threats. He wrote that he wanted to become a professional school shooter. The FBI received a tip about him weeks before the attack. Local police had been to his home dozens of times. Each report was filed, noted, and forgotten. He had been adopted at birth. Both adoptive parents died before he turned 19. Alone, angry, and untreated, he began to spiral. Neighbors saw him wandering aimlessly with air rifles, muttering to himself. Everyone saw the danger. No one stopped it. After his arrest, investigators described him as detached, almost robotic. He confessed calmly. He said he wanted people to feel pain. He wanted to be remembered, but what he created was not remembrance, only rage and sorrow. During his trial, survivors and parents filled the courtroom. One father said, "My daughter went to school with a notebook and came home in a body bag." Another mother stood up and whispered, "You took everything." Cruz showed no emotion. He pleaded guilty to all charges. The jury spared him the death penalty. He received life in prison without parole. He now spends 23 hours a day alone in a cell. The silence he once imposed on others now his own. The school building still stands, locked behind fences, untouched since that day. Bullet holes mark the walls. Books, blood, and backpacks lie frozen in time. The district plans to demolish it, but trauma doesn't fall with walls. The Parkland shooting didn't just destroy a school, it ignited a generation. Survivors became activists, standing before microphones, trembling but unbroken. They demanded change, but behind their strength, nightmares still linger. Some still can't sleep. Some still hear the gunfire every time the bell rings. 17 lives ended that day, but thousands were changed forever. Nikolaz Cruz wanted fame. He got infamy, and even that will fade. What remains are the faces he tried to erase, faces that remind the world what happens when warnings go unanswered. The tragedy of Parkland wasn't a surprise. It was a chain of ignored signs, each one small enough to overlook, each one leading here. A system saw everything but acted on nothing. The story of Nikolaz Cruz is not only about violence, it is about blindness, a collective refusal to see what's in front of us until it's too late. 17 names echo in that silence, and one truth remains. Evil grows loudest when the world chooses not to listen. And in another small American town, 6 years earlier, a different silence broke. A 20-year-old would walk into an elementary school with the same weapon and the same emptiness. And what he did there would redefine horror itself. Sandy Hook Elementary, Newtown, Connecticut, 6 years before Parkland. It was a Friday morning in Newtown, Connecticut, December 14th, 2012. The air was cold and still, the kind that makes small towns feel untouched by the world. Inside Sandy Hook Elementary School, children were decorating paper snowflakes. Teachers prepared for the last week before Christmas. Then, at 9:35 a.m., a man with a rifle shattered the calm forever. His name was Adam Peter Lanza, 20 years old, pale and silent. That morning, he shot his mother, Nancy, 4 times in the head while she slept. Then he took her car, her rifle, and her keys. She had once worked at the school he was driving toward. Now he was bringing death back to it. At the entrance, he shot through the hut glass doors. The sound echoed across the parking lot. Inside, Principal Dawn Hochsprung and school psychologist Mary Sherlocks ran toward the noise. Both were killed instantly. Teachers shouted for their classes to hide. They pushed desks against doors, pulled children into closets, and prayed. In the next 11 minutes, Lanza entered 2 classrooms filled with first graders, 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds. He killed 20 children and 6 adults before turning the gun on himself as police closed in. He had fired more than 150 rounds. No one ever heard him speak. The officers who entered the school described silence so thick it felt physical. They said the sound of Christmas decorations clicking in the heater vents was the only thing left moving. The nation's heart broke that morning. It wasn't a high school, not a college. It was an elementary school. Children barely tall enough to reach the door handles. The photos of their faces, missing teeth, bright smiles, became symbols of a loss too large to measure. The investigation into Adam Lanza's life revealed a mind collapsing inward. He had been withdrawn since childhood, obsessed with routine and control. Diagnosed early with autism spectrum disorder, severe anxiety, and obsessive-compulsive traits, he spent most of his time at home. His mother homeschooled him and shielded him from the world. She took him to gun ranges, believing it helped him focus. She kept her firearms clean, locked, organized, but always accessible. He barely spoke to anyone outside his home. When he did, his voice was flat, empty, mechanical. He avoided mirrors, avoided touch, avoided life. His only company became his computer screen. Investigators later recovered fragments of his destroyed hard drive. He had researched other mass shootings for years. He analyzed their methods, timing, and body counts like data points. Columbine, Virginia Tech. He studied them as if preparing for an exam. And when the day came, he executed it with the same detached precision. He did not leave a manifesto or apology, only silence. Experts later said he showed signs of psychosis, but no clear motive. He wanted control, nothing more. Control over his mother, control over the chaos he felt inside. And in that pursuit, he became chaos itself. The children he murdered were 6 and 7 years old. Their names filled church walls and candlelight vigils across the world. Parents placed stuffed animals on empty beds, Christmas gifts still wrapped beneath trees. Even seasoned investigators wept, openly. The coroner called it the hardest scene he had ever witnessed. Sandy Hook was more than another shooting. It was a rupture in the soul of a nation. If evil could walk into a room of first graders, it meant no one was safe anywhere. No argument, no explanation, no political debate could soften that truth. The aftermath was chaos layered over grief. Conspiracy theorists claimed it was fake. Actors, props, staged tears. Parents who had just buried their children were harassed and threatened by strangers. They lost their privacy, then their peace. As one mother said, "They killed our children, and then they tried to kill their memory. The school was demolished soon after. A new one was built nearby, brighter, full of sunlight, designed to feel safe again. But safety is an illusion Newtown no longer believes in. The memorial sits in quiet woods, surrounded by water and white stone. Every December, families gather there, holding hands, whispering names. No speeches, no politics, only silence. Adam Lanza's story isn't about ideology or revenge, it's about isolation, a human soul collapsing under the weight of its own emptiness. He was not born a monster. He became one, piece by piece, through neglect, fear, and the quiet belief that withdrawal meant protection. It didn't. It created something far worse. The tragedy of Sandy Hook is not just what happened inside that building. It's what it revealed, the fragility of innocence and the consequences of silence. Because if a child can grow up unseen, unheard, and unloved long enough, he will make the world feel the same. 26 people died that morning. 20 of them were children. And one truth remains. Evil often begins where empathy ends. But the years would not end the violence. Another young man, hundreds of miles away, would grow up in the same darkness. Online, isolated, unseen, and one morning, he too would walk into a school carrying a rifle. This time, in a small Texas town called Uvalde. Robb Elementary School, Uvalde, Texas, 10 years after Sandy Hook, another small Texas town would face the same nightmare. It was May 24th, 2022. The last week of school at Robb Elementary in Uvalde. Children wore bright clothes for awards day. Parents took photos, proud and unaware that these would be the last pictures they'd ever take. At 11:28 that morning, 18-year-old Salvador Ramos crashed his grandmother's truck near the school. He had just shot her in the face at home. She survived and called the police. By then, he was already walking toward the school with a rifle in his hands. He wore black armor, carried a new AR-15, and had purchased hundreds of rounds of ammunition legally, days after turning 18. He entered through an unlocked side door. Inside, classrooms of 2nd, 3rd, and 4th graders practiced reading and math. At 11:33, the first gunshots echoed through the hallways. In minutes, 19 children and 2 teachers were dead or dying. Police arrived almost immediately. They had weapons, shields, and training, but they waited 77 minutes as the shooter remained inside, firing occasionally, reloading, and walking among the bodies. Some children were still alive. They called 911 on cell phones, whispering, "Please send help." Dispatchers relayed the calls. Officers did not move. Parents outside the school begged to go in. Some were restrained, even handcuffed, for trying. One mother later said, "They let our babies die while they stood there." At 12:50, officers finally entered the classroom and shot Ramos dead. The silence that followed was unbearable, broken only by radios and the ringing of abandoned phones. The youngest victim was 9. The aftermath revealed layer upon layer of failure, the unlocked door, the slow response, the lies told afterward. Officials changed timelines, blamed confusion, denied hesitation. But the truth was clear. Fear and indecision had killed as surely as bullets. Who was Salvador Ramos? A local boy, quiet, withdrawn. He had dropped out of high school, worked part-time at Wendy's, and lived with his grandmother after fighting constantly with his mother. He was bullied for his clothes, his stutter, his shyness. Online, he became someone else. Angry, armed, defiant. He posted pictures of guns, sent threats to strangers, and wrote that one day people would remember his name. The warning signs were there. He messaged a girl overseas days before the attack, saying he had a secret. She didn't respond. He bought his weapons legally 1 week after turning 18. No criminal record, no mental health history, nothing to stop him. In his digital trail, investigators found no clear motive, no manifesto, no note, just obsession, hours of shooting videos, chats about weapons, and fantasies of violence. He seemed driven less by ideology than by emptiness. He wanted to make the world hurt the way he did. When the first funerals began, the town was still surrounded by police tape. Coffins were small, white, carried by trembling fathers. Mothers collapsed beside photographs of children smiling in graduation caps made of paper. One father said, "I can't walk past her bedroom door. Her shoes are still there." The classroom where it happened was sealed for weeks. Teachers described drawings still pinned to the walls, homework half finished. the smell of crayons and blood. No one could enter without crying. The building was demolished months later. A new one will be built, but Uvalde itself will never be the same. The story of Salvador Ramos is not about ideology, politics, or even mental illness. It's about neglect, the kind that grows in silence until it becomes rage. He was a boy left alone too long, unnoticed until he made himself impossible to ignore. Some officers resigned after that day. One took his own life, haunted by the sound of those gunshots. The chief who delayed entry lost his job, but no punishment could bring back what hesitation cost. 19 children, 2 teachers, one small town that will never stop hearing the echoes. Their names are carved now into 21 crosses that stand where the school once stood. Visitors come every day, leaving flowers, toys, and letters addressed to children who will never read them. A mother who visits daily says she talks to her daughter as if she's still listening. I tell her I'm sorry, I tell her I love her. Salvador Ramos wanted attention. He believed his name would live forever, but history forgets killers faster than it forgets children. His name will fade, theirs will not. Uvalde exposed everything we still refuse to face. How quickly warning signs are ignored, how deeply silence kills, how even heroes can freeze when fear outweighs duty. He was not a monster born of ideology. He was the result of everything we fail to fix. And his story ends the same way it began, in loneliness, confusion, and silence. But Uvalde would not be the last time America's classrooms turned into battlefields. Before it happened, another Texas high school had already felt the same horror. A quiet teenager with a trench coat and a shotgun, and a town that still hasn't found its voice again. Santa Fe High School, Santa Fe, Texas. Before Uvalde, before Parkland, another small Texas town learned the same truth. That evil does not need a reason. It only needs time to grow. It was May 18th, 2018, a Friday morning in Santa Fe, Texas. The sun was already warm, the air thick with summer. Inside Santa Fe High School, students were settling into their first class. In the art room, laughter and music filled the space. They were teenagers, counting down to vacation. Then the first shot cracked the air. 17-year-old Dimitrios Pagourtzis walked into the classroom wearing a black trench coat, a shotgun in one hand, a revolver in the other. Both guns belonged to his father. He wore a t-shirt that read, "Born to Kill." Hidden under his coat were explosives and knives. He fired without hesitation. The first victim was Shauna Fisher, a classmate who had rejected him publicly a week earlier. Her mother later said he had been humiliated, and that humiliation became rage. Within minutes, the art room became a trap. Students hid behind tables, begged to be let out, whispered prayers. Some played dead. He reloaded calmly and kept firing. By the time police arrived, 10 people were dead, 8 students and 2 teachers. 13 others were wounded. Pagourtzis exchanged gunfire with officers, then retreated into a storage closet. For nearly an hour, negotiators spoke to him through the door. He told them he didn't shoot certain classmates because he liked them. He said he wanted to tell his story. At 8:35 a.m., he surrendered. He showed no emotion. He told police he planned to kill himself, but didn't have the courage. When they searched his backpack and locker, they found sketches of the attack, hand-drawn maps of the school, notes about timing, and a list of targets. He idolized the Columbine shooters. He had studied their methods, their weapons, even their clothes. He wanted to be remembered, not to disappear. The small town of Santa Fe became the next name on a list no one wants to join. Parents gathered outside the school, crying, calling, hoping. Inside, the scene was chaos, blood, broken glass, half-finished art projects. One painting on the wall read, "Be kind." It was stained with red. For the victims' families, time froze. For the rest of the world, it was just another headline. But to those who survived, the sound of that morning never stopped. One student said, "Every time I close my eyes, I hear it again." Who was Dimitrios Pagourtzis? Teachers called him quiet, polite, even shy. He played on the football team, earned good grades, and never caused trouble. But classmates said there was something off. The way he dressed, the way he stared, the way he joked about death. He wore long coats in the heat, drew skulls in notebooks, and posted pictures of guns online. He once told a friend, "One day, I'll do something big." No one believed him. At home, his parents saw nothing unusual. The guns he used were theirs, kept unlocked. He had no criminal record, no diagnosis, no plan for the future, only quiet resentment and growing isolation. After his arrest, he was calm and cooperative. He told detectives he wanted to show others his power, but didn't want to hurt his friends. He said he spared the ones he liked. That line would haunt investigators and every parent who heard it. In court, psychiatrists described him as deeply disturbed. He heard voices, saw shadows, believed he was possessed. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia and major depressive disorder. He was declared incompetent to stand trial and sent to a state hospital for treatment. Years later, he remains there, heavily medicated and evaluated every 6 months. Doctors say he may never be fit for trial. For the victims' families, that means no justice, only waiting for updates, waiting for something that may never come. As one father said, "We buried our children. He gets to keep breathing." The school reopened the following fall. The art room was rebuilt, painted bright yellow, but the students say it still feels heavy. The laughter never sounds quite the same. Outside, a memorial garden grows. 10 trees, one for each victim. They bloom every spring, their branches intertwining like the names carved into their roots. Santa Fe faded from the headlines quickly, replaced by the next tragedy. But for those who lived it, time stopped in that single hour. The same patterns, the same questions, the same silence from a world too numb to listen. Dimitrios Pagourtzis wasn't driven by ideology or fame. He was driven by emptiness, a quiet kind of evil that hides behind a polite smile. He believed violence would make him matter. It only made him disappear. And in that vanishing act, another town lost its innocence. Another generation learned what fear sounds like. Another set of parents learned what it means to outlive your child. 10 people died that morning. Hundreds more carry invisible wounds that may never heal. And the shooter sits behind hospital walls, a living reminder that sometimes evil does not die. It simply waits. But Santa Fe was not the last lesson unlearned. 3 years later, in another small town hundreds of miles away, a 15-year-old boy would walk into a high school with a handgun and turn a normal day into another headline. Oxford High School, Oxford Township, Michigan. 3 years after Santa Fe, the pattern repeated, a warning unheeded, a tragedy foretold. It was November 30th, 2021, a cold Tuesday morning at Oxford High School in Michigan. The sound of lockers, laughter, and footsteps filled the halls. At 12:51 p.m., those sounds vanished beneath the echo of gunfire. The shooter was Ethan Robert Crumbley, 15 years old. A quiet sophomore who sat in the back of classrooms, sketching in notebooks and rarely speaking. He wore a backpack heavier than it looked. Inside was a 9mm Sig Sauer handgun, a weapon his parents had bought Yin 4 days earlier as an early Christmas gift. That morning, teachers had already seen the signs. A math worksheet with violent drawings, blood, bullets, a gun pointed at words that read, "The thoughts won't stop. Help me." They called his parents to the school. They showed them the drawings. They begged them to take him home. The parents refused. They told staff he needed to learn responsibility. Then they left. Ethan returned to class with the same backpack that hid his gun. Less than 2 hours later, he stepped into the hallway and opened fire. He moved quickly, methodically, firing at anyone within sight. Students ran, hid under desks, locked classroom doors. Some texted their parents goodbye. Others played dead. The attack lasted only minutes. 4 students were killed: Tate Meyer, Hannah St. Juliana, Madison Baldwin, and Justin Schilling. 7 others were wounded. When police arrived, Ethan placed the gun on the floor and surrendered without a word. He was calm, almost relieved. As investigators pieced the story together, the horror deepened. His parents, James and Jennifer Crumbley, had purchased the gun for him, called it his new beauty, and took him to a shooting range days before the attack. When the school called them about the drawings, the gun had already been hidden in Ethan's backpack. They never mentioned it. The warning signs had been flashing for months. He had searched online for ammunition during class. He wrote in his journal about hearing voices, about wanting to see people suffer. He drew guns and blood. He begged for help no one gave him. And when the final moment came, he acted with the coldness of someone long past rescue. After his arrest, he sat in silence. He refused food, refused to speak, and stared at the wall for hours. When detectives asked why he did it, he said nothing, only that the demons won. For the first time in American history, prosecutors charged the parents as well, not as accessories after the fact, but as participants in negligence so severe it cost lives. Their trial exposed text messages, social media posts, and lies. Jennifer texted her son hours before the attack, "Don't do it." It was already too late. In court, Ethan pleaded guilty to all charges: terrorism, murder, assault. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. The judge called him beyond rehabilitation. His parents were found guilty of involuntary manslaughter, each receiving 10 to 15 years. A family destroyed by its own denial. Oxford Township changed overnight. The school shut down for weeks. The hallways, once filled with noise, became shrines lined with candles and letters. 4 lockers covered in flowers stood untouched, frozen in time. Teachers returned to find bullet holes patched, but fear still in the air. The smell of cleaning solution couldn't erase the memory. The students who survived carried guilt as much as grief. One said, "He sat behind me in class. I never thought he could do this." Another said, "He asked for help. We all missed it." Ethan Crumbley's story is not about a monster born from hate. It's about neglect, a child screaming into the void while adults covered their ears. The gun was his, the bullets his, but the silence that raised him belonged to others. His parents saw the storm coming and looked away. The school saw the warning signs and hesitated. Every small decision, every shrug, every "he's just a kid" became another step toward the sound of that first shot. In the aftermath, Oxford became another scar on the same map: Columbine, Sandy Hook, Parkland, Santa Fe, Uvalde. Each name another reminder that the lessons never stick. The victims' families gathered at candlelight vigils, holding photos against the cold. They said their children's names one by one, the crowd whispering each in return. It was not justice, it was remembrance. And in the quiet that followed, there was no anger, only exhaustion. Ethan sits alone now in a maximum security cell. 15 when he pulled the trigger, sentenced to die in prison before he ever reached adulthood. He wanted power. What he found was emptiness. And as Oxford mourned, another tragedy was already forming. This time, not a student, but a former one, a 28-year-old who once walked the same halls she would later destroy. The Covenant School, Nashville, Tennessee. From Michigan to Tennessee, the pattern continued, not from hatred, but from despair that turned into rage. It was March 27, 2023. A Monday morning at the Covenant School, a small private Christian academy in Nashville. Students were beginning their day with chapel and math lessons. Sunlight filled the hallways. By 10:13 a.m., that light was replaced with gunfire. The shooter was Aiden Hale, 28 years old, once known as Audrey Elizabeth Hale, a former student of the school. They carried 2 assault rifles and a handgun, all purchased legally. In their car, police would later find maps, journals, and a note that read, "I'm ready to die today." Before driving to the school, Hale sent a message to a friend on Instagram. "I'm planning to die today. You'll probably hear about me on the news." The friend tried to call the police, but by the time the alert reached dispatch, it was too late. At 10:11, Hale shot through the glass doors of the school's main entrance and stepped inside. The first victim was Catherine Kuntz, the 60-year-old head of school who ran toward the gunfire. Within minutes, Cynthia Peak, a substitute teacher, and Mike Hill, the school custodian, were also dead. 3 9-year-old children, Evelyn Dykehouse, Hallie Scruggs, and William Kinney, were shot in their classrooms. The entire attack lasted only 14 minutes. Hale moved through the hallways with precision, checking corners, firing in bursts. Police body cameras would later capture the moment officers arrived, sprinting toward the sound of shots. At 10:24, 2 officers confronted Hale on the second floor and fired. It was over. The silence that followed was deafening. The sound of alarms, footsteps, and radios echoed through empty halls. One officer's voice trembled as he whispered, "Kids, it's safe now." The Covenant shooting shocked the nation, not just because of who was killed, but because of who did the killing. Hale had been a student there years earlier. Classmates described them as quiet and artistic and deeply religious. Over time, that faith turned into conflict. They struggled with identity, isolation, and rejection. In journals later recovered, Hale wrote about years of anger and confusion, feelings of being unseen, unwanted, unloved. They planned the shooting for months, drawing detailed maps and schedules. Police found a manifesto, though it was never publicly released. Officials called it disturbing, full of resentment toward the school and its symbolism. The attack, they said, was calculated, not random, not impulsive. Hale's parents told police they had no idea their child owned weapons. They believed they had sold them. In truth, Hale had legally purchased 7 firearms from local dealers over the past few years. They hid them around the house, waiting for a reason to use them. The victims' families later said the same thing as so many before them. We never thought it could happen here. The Covenant School was small, fewer than 200 students, close-knit, protected. But violence doesn't care about walls or gates. It only needs one moment, one mind too far gone. The officers who responded that day were hailed as heroes. Their bravery ended the threat in minutes, not hours. But even heroism has a cost. One of the officers later said he still hears the echo of children crying in the stairwell. In the aftermath, the debate reignited, about guns, about mental health, about identity. But beneath the noise, the truth was simple and terrible. 3 children and 3 adults went to school that morning, and they never came home. The church that housed the school held their funerals together. 6 caskets lined the altar. The pastor's voice cracked as he said their names, his own daughter among them. Outside, thousands gathered, holding candles. The city of Nashville wept together that night. For the victims, for the shooter, for the sickness that keeps repeating. Aiden Hale's story isn't just about anger. It's about invisibility, a life spent searching for meaning and finding only pain. They were a product of neglect, confusion, and the quiet storm that brews when despair is ignored. And like the others before them, they decided the only way to be seen was through destruction. The Covenant shooting proved once again that evil doesn't always announce itself with hate. Sometimes it arrives dressed in sadness. Sometimes it looks like a child you once taught, walking back through the doors you held open. Nashville built a memorial in their honor, 6 stone pillars encircling a fountain, each name carved deep enough to last longer than memory. Parents still visit every week, touching the letters, whispering prayers through tears. 6 lives gone, 1 soul lost long before that morning ever began, and a country once again asking questions it will never answer. But the Covenant School would not be the final chapter. Long before Nashville, years earlier, another quiet campus had been turned into a battlefield, not by a child, but by a college student obsessed with power, a man who saw murder as the only way to be seen. Umpqua Community College, Roseburg, Oregon. It was October 1st, 2015, a Thursday morning like countless others in Roseburg, Oregon. The small town was surrounded by pine-covered hills and the slow hum of quiet lives. Students at Umpqua Community College carried coffee cups and notebooks, heading to their first classes of the day. It was the kind of place where people smiled at strangers, the kind of place where tragedy felt impossible. At 9:38 in the morning, 26-year-old Christopher Sean Harper Mercer parked his small black car outside Snyder Hall. Inside were 6 guns, extra magazines, and a manifesto he had been writing for months. He stepped out, dressed in black, his movements deliberate, his face calm. He walked toward a writing class that had already begun. When he entered, he closed the door behind him. The students barely looked up until he spoke. "Stand up if you are Christian." A pause, confusion, then gunfire. Those who stood were shot in the head. Those who did not were shot in the leg or the back. He asked questions between bullets, like a teacher holding some twisted lesson. When it was over, 9 people were dead, 9 more were injured, and the silence that followed would hang over Roseburg forever. Outside, police swarmed the campus. Students ran from buildings, hands in the air, tears streaming down their faces. Helicopters circled overhead. From the hills, smoke from gunfire drifted faintly in the wind. When officers reached Snyder Hall, they exchanged fire with the shooter. Harper Mercer was hit once. He retreated into the classroom and turned the gun on himself. It was 9:54 in the morning, 16 minutes of terror, and then it was done. In the aftermath, investigators began piecing together who this man had been, what had led him to this place. He was quiet, awkward, withdrawn. Neighbors barely remembered his voice. He lived with his mother in a small apartment filled with weapons. She was a nurse, proud of her son and fiercely protective. She often posted online about her love of firearms and her right to own them. Together, they would go target shooting on weekends. But Christopher's world was shrinking. He suffered from depression and a learning disability. He struggled to find work, to make friends, to belong anywhere. He spent most of his time on online forums, deep in digital spaces that glorified violence. There, he found his heroes, the shooters who came before him. He studied them the way others study the scripture. Their stories became his inspiration. In his writings, investigators found pages filled with resentment and loneliness. He described feeling invisible, forgotten, unloved. He believed the world rewarded only cruelty, and he wanted to prove that he existed. He wrote that the more people you kill, the more you are noticed. And that to him was meaning. Harper Mercer's fascination with previous massacres was chilling. He wrote about the Columbine shooters with admiration. He analyzed the details of their attacks, their weapons, their timing, their impact. He did not want to die unknown. He wanted a number. He wanted a record. But numbers are not legacies. They are gravestones written in statistics. When police entered his apartment after the shooting, they found 13 firearms, all purchased legally. There were bulletproof vests, hundreds of rounds of ammunition, and handwritten notes blaming society for his pain. He claimed to hate religion, to despise happiness, to envy those who had the courage to end their lives in glory. He called himself the man who will be remembered. But remembrance is not respect, and fame earned through blood is only infamy wearing another name. Roseburg was not prepared for the cameras, for the reporters, for the flood of sorrow that descended on the town. Residents stood in silence during vigils, holding candles that flickered against the autumn wind. Families clutched photos of their loved ones, smiling faces that would never grow older. The community spoke in whispers, as if raising their voices might wake the ghosts. For the survivors, recovery was slow and uneven. One student remembered lying on the floor, pretending to be dead, feeling the warmth of another student's blood spreading beside her. Another said he still heard the question in his sleep, "Are you Christian?" Followed by the sound that never stops echoing. In courtrooms and interviews, people tried to understand. Was it hatred of faith, or was it just another mind imploding under the weight of loneliness? The truth, as always, is more complicated. It was not religion he hated. It was meaning itself. He saw belief, joy, and purpose as luxuries reserved for others. And when he could not have them, he chose destruction instead. The story of Umpqua Community College became another entry in the long list of tragedies America promised to learn from, but never did. Politicians made statements. Experts gave interviews. Then the cameras left, and the quiet town returned to its silence. But it was not the same silence as before. It was the kind that hums with memory, the kind that never truly ends. Today, the classroom in Snyder Hall remains closed. Flowers and letters still appear at its door every year on October 1st. And on that day, the town stops, not in ceremony, but in shared grief. Christopher Sean Harper Mercer sought recognition. He believed that in taking lives, he would carve his name into history. But time has already begun to erase him, leaving only the names of the innocent he destroyed. 9 lives stolen, 9 futures unfulfilled, 9 reasons to remember what loneliness, unchecked and armed, can become. And so, his legacy is not in the story he wanted to write, but in the one he left behind, a warning written in blood that evil does not need noise to exist. It only needs attention. And far to the north, in Washington state, the cycle was already starting again. This time, the shooter wasn't a stranger or even an outsider. He was homecoming royalty, a smiling face in the yearbook, a teenager who turned his gun on the very friends who had trusted him most. STEM School, Highlands Ranch, Colorado. It was May 7th, 2019. A Tuesday morning in Highlands Ranch, Colorado. The STEM school sat just a few miles from the site of another tragedy, Columbine High School. 2 decades had passed since that day, yet the shadows of Columbine still hung over Colorado like a ghost that refused to leave. No one imagined it would happen again, not here, not now. At 1:40 in the afternoon, 2 students walked into the school carrying handguns and knives. Their names were Alec McKinney, 16 years old, and Devin Erickson, 18. They were friends, bound by resentment, secrecy, and a shared fascination with violence. They entered through separate doors, planning to meet in the middle. Their goal was simple and terrible: to create chaos, to make the world notice them, to become part of the dark history they idolized. But what happened next would not go as planned. The first shots echoed through a classroom filled with technology students. Tables flipped, chairs crashed, screams broke the rhythm of the day. Amid the panic, one student, 18-year-old Kendrick Castillo, stood up. He lunged toward Devin Erickson, tackling him against the wall. A single gunshot struck Kendrick in the chest. He fell to the floor. His courage stopped what could have been a massacre. Others followed his lead, tackling Alec McKinney and pinning him down until police arrived. It was over in minutes. 1 dead, 8 injured. Dozens saved by the bravery of one young man who chose to move forward when everyone else ran. In the aftermath, the school felt both cursed and sacred, a place where tragedy met heroism. Students cried and held each other in silence, the echoes of Kendrick's sacrifice filling every hallway. He was hailed as a hero across the nation, his name spoken in the same breath as the word courage. But behind the headlines, behind the candles and tears, were 2 other names: Alec McKinney and Devin Erickson, and the question of why. Alec McKinney was small, quiet, and deeply troubled. He came from a fractured home and struggled with identity, anger, and depression. He described himself as invisible, forgotten by teachers and classmates alike. In his mind, the world had taken everything from him. He wanted to take something back. Devin Erickson was older, charismatic, the kind of student who seemed easygoing and confident. He played in a band, made people laugh, dyed his hair bright colors. But behind the humor was discontent, frustration with authority, boredom with school, a fascination with rebellion. The 2 met and formed a bond built on shared disillusionment. Together, they began to plan. They studied Columbine, reading about the shooters, watching documentaries. They shared messages filled with dark jokes, references to death, and fantasies about being remembered. They talked about feeling powerless and how one act could make them matter. Their pain became a project. Their project became a plan. On that Tuesday afternoon, they carried it out, but the plan failed before it began, because even in their anger, they underestimated courage. When officers arrived, Devin was covered in blood and shaking. Alec was crying. Neither resisted arrest. Both confessed quickly, and both gave reasons that were more excuses than explanations. Alec told investigators he had been bullied for being different. He said he wanted to make people suffer like he did. He claimed Devin was supposed to kill him at the end of it all, to complete the script they had written together. Devin, in his own interview, said he had been manipulated by Alec, that he did not want to kill anyone, that he was coerced. The truth lies somewhere between those stories, a blur of guilt, anger, and denial. When the trial began, the courtroom filled with families still reeling from grief. Kendrick Castillo's parents sat in the front row, holding hands. They listened to recordings of the chaos, to witnesses describing how their son had saved lives by giving his own. They listened without tears, only silence, heavy and unending. Alec McKinney was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 40 years. Devin Erickson received life without parole. The 2 former friends now live in separate prisons, their names forever linked by one violent act and one young man's bravery. But for the community of Highlands Ranch, the story did not end in that courtroom. It lives in every classroom, in every fire drill, in every moment of silence. It lives in the fear that whispers through schools across America. What if it happens again? The tragedy of STEM Highlands Ranch is not only in its violence, but in its proximity to Columbine, 2 schools, 20 years apart, joined by the same sickness. It is the reminder that even when the world swears never again, history waits patiently for repetition. Kendrick Castillo's name became the light in that darkness. He did not plan to be a hero. He was just a student who acted on instinct, on compassion, on courage. His father later said, "Kendrick always wanted to protect people. Even in death, he did." When people speak of that day, they remember him first, not the shooters, not their excuses, not their anger, because courage outlives cruelty, and selflessness silences evil. The story of Alec McKinney and Devin Erickson is not about fame or infamy. It is about how 2 young minds convinced themselves that pain could be power. And it is about how one act of bravery proved them wrong. In the end, the shooting at the STEM School Highlands Ranch did not become another Columbine, because one young man refused to let it. Kendrick's final act was not just resistance, it was defiance, against fear, against hatred, against the idea that violence wins. And if there is one thing the world should remember from that day, it is this: that even in the darkest rooms, there will always be someone who stands up when everyone else hides. Virginia Tech, Blacksburg, Virginia. It was April 16, 2007. Morning sunlight rolled across the red brick buildings of Virginia Tech University. Students hurried to class, sipping coffee, laughing, half asleep but alive. No one could imagine that within hours the air would be filled with gunfire. At 7:15 a.m., 23-year-old Seung Hui Cho left his dorm room carrying 2 handguns and hundreds of rounds of ammunition. He walked toward West Ambler Johnston Hall, a student residence filled with early risers preparing for the day. Inside a 4th-floor room, he shot Emily Hilscher and Ryan Clark, killing them both without a word. Then he turned and walked away. Campus police believed it was a domestic dispute. The university stayed open. 2 hours passed. In that time, Cho returned to his room, changed his clothes, and recorded his final message. At 9:15, he mailed a package to NBC News, a manifesto of anger and delusion. He called himself a martyr, a victim, a savior. He said, "You had 100 billion chances to avoid today." His voice was flat, emotionless, almost rehearsed. At 9:40, Cho entered Norris Hall, one of the university's main buildings. He chained the doors shut and placed a note that read, "If you open this, a bomb will explode." There was no bomb, only him. He began shooting on the 2nd floor. 11 minutes of terror followed. He moved from room to room, firing into classrooms, reloading calmly. Students hid under desks, jumped from windows, or played dead among the wounded. One professor, Liviu Librescu, a Holocaust survivor, blocked the door with his body, saving every student inside. He was killed where he stood. When police reached the hallway at 9:51, the shots stopped. Cho turned one gun on himself. 32 people were dead. 17 were wounded. The deadliest school shooting in American history had lasted less than 12 minutes. Outside, chaos spread. Students ran, craning, clutching their phones. Parents called again and again, waiting for someone to answer. Helicopters circled above the campus. Reporters arrived before the blood was dry. And the world watched another name join the list of American tragedies. Who was Seung Hui Cho? He had been born in South Korea and moved to the United States when he was 8. Teachers described him as bright but withdrawn, unable to look anyone in the eye. He was diagnosed with selective mutism and severe anxiety disorder. Therapists recommended treatment, but the family moved often. He slipped through the cracks. By high school, he barely spoke. By college, his silence had hardened into something darker. At Virginia Tech, professors noticed the warning signs. His writing was violent, his behavior unsettling. In one creative writing class, he turned in plays about murder and revenge. Professor Nikki Giovanni demanded he be removed from her class. He was referred to counseling, but stopped going. No one followed up. Each red flag became paperwork. In his manifesto, Cho blamed everyone. He hated the rich, the happy, the confident. He wrote about being mocked, ignored, invisible. He saw himself as both victim and executioner. He believed the world had forced his hand, but his violence came from resentment, not righteousness. He was not avenging anything. He was punishing everyone. Investigators later found he had been preparing for months. He bought guns legally, practiced shooting, and studied past massacres. He admired the Columbine shooters. He wanted to outdo them, to be remembered longer, to make his name impossible to forget. But the world does not remember him the way he imagined. His name is a whisper, a warning. The names that matter are the 32 he tried to erase. Virginia Tech was left shattered. Classes were canceled. The drill field filled with candles and flowers. 32 bells rang that night, each one echoing through the dark hills of Blacksburg. The weight of silence felt unbearable. Families buried their children side by side. Parents clutched photographs that would never age. Students lit candles, sang songs, and promised to rebuild. The nation mourned again, promising, as it always does, that this would be the last time. It wasn't. The tragedy forced universities across the country to change. More mental health support, faster alerts, locked doors. But systems alone cannot fix what society refuses to face. Cho's story exposed the cost of ignoring isolation, of mistaking silence for peace. He was seen by many, teachers, counselors, classmates, but truly understood by no one. For survivors, the years after became a quiet battle. Some became activists, others never spoke publicly again. Each carries the echo of that morning, footsteps in a hallway, doors slamming, the sound of gunfire that never leaves their heads. Every April 16th, the campus gathers at dawn. 32 candles glow against the wind. As the sun rises, the names are read aloud, not for fame, not for history, but for memory. Students stand still, some crying, some silent, all connected by the same grief. Cho wanted to be immortal, but time erases monsters. It remembers the innocent instead, the professors, the dreamers, the friends. Their names are carved in stone across the campus, unbroken by the years. Virginia Tech stands rebuilt now. The walls are stronger, the alarms louder, but the heart of the school beats differently. It carries a permanent ache, a reminder that even the quietest student can hold the loudest storm. Seung Hui Cho's story is not about one day of violence. It is about years of silence that no one dared to break. It is about what happens when warning signs are ignored and pain is mistaken for shyness. Evil rarely arrives shouting. Sometimes it waits quietly, unseen, until the day it speaks in gunfire. And when it does, it leaves behind a silence that never ends. 10 stories, 10 names that turned classrooms into battlegrounds. Each one different, a different place, a different face, a different reason, yet all connected by the same silence before the first shot. We call them monsters, but most began as something else, lonely, ignored, invisible. The danger was never born in the moment they pulled the trigger. It grew slowly, in bedrooms, in chat rooms, in the quiet corners of ordinary schools. Behind every tragedy, there were warnings, drawings, essays, cries for help mistaken for noise. And after every one, the same questions return. Why didn't anyone stop it? How could this happen again? The truth is, evil does not always arrive as a stranger. Sometimes it sits next to us in class. Sometimes it eats dinner at our table. Sometimes it hides behind a smile we mistake for peace. The names of the killers will fade, as they should, but the names of the innocent, the children, the teachers, the heroes, must never disappear. Their stories are not about violence. They are about the lives that could have been. And if there is one lesson in all of this, it is that silence kills long before bullets do. Listen to the quiet ones, pay attention to the shadows, and never believe it cannot happen again. If you found meaning in this story, if you believe these voices deserve to be heard, stay with us, subscribe, because remembering them is the only way we stop this from becoming just another story.